Oh yes, I believe it so strongly, I tattooed it across my ribs. And I will show you in a moment. But first I will tell you the tale of how I went from being raised in a cult in Mormonism, finding out everything I'd been told in my life was a lie, to being able to believe something so purely that it became a permanent fixture on my body. There's nothing quite like Mormonism to make you believe there is no God. I have known a lot of people who have left the Mormon church, and almost 100% of them went from Mormonism to atheism. Seems like Mormonism is a bit of the end of the road. And same, truth became extremely important to me. And because I could see no truth that pointed to the existence of God, I was like, no thanks. And although I was very happy to feel like I was committing to truth, there was a darkness in this chapter. Because although false, religion had given me a very clear purpose of why we're here. So I started waking up in the middle of the night with these questions for the first time in my life, like, what happens after we die? I would walk into a coffee shop full of people and just want to scream at everyone, like, how are you okay with this? None of us knows what happens after we die. It was totally freaking me out. And I was like, if there is no God and there is no purpose, then who are these other people around me? Like, what do they mean to me? We're all just sojourners on our way to the eternal void. But as I do, I just threw myself into work. I increased our ROI that year by 1,840 times. And my brain was kind of breaking. Like, remember, within the span of just a few years, I found out my entire life was a lie. I left the cult, I left the Mormon church, I divorced my abusive husband, and I'm in this free fall of an existential crisis. But you know how I increased our ROI by over 1,000 times? I started doing these practices that seemed woo-woo, but I totally saw how they work with neuroscience. For instance, understanding manifesting with how our reticular activating system neurologically works. Happy to make other videos on those, but just know, I was utilizing the brain science behind woo-woo practices. But then things started going like really woo. Like, I would go to a business conference and be in the hotel lobby, and a woman would see me from across the room, make a beeline. I've never met her before. And she would tell me that she has a message to deliver me. One time this happened, she sat me down and she's like, there's rainbow light coming from you. And she essentially like told me all of this business plan stuff of my purpose in the world to help people deprogram from oppressive systems they've been raised in, just like I had been through. One time I traveled out of state to get some health tests done, and a woman at the office, when she saw me, she pulled me aside and she's like, so I have these spiritual gifts and I've got a really strong message for you. And she went on to tell me the story that I've told you here. Now remember, this was not a time that I was telling anyone the cult story. It was so specific. She knew about my dad. She knew I'd been raised into the cult. Her guides were telling her about religious abuse. She knew about my abusive ex-husband. Like, she couldn't have even looked up my name online and found this stuff because I hadn't talked about it yet. So on the one hand, I could see the science behind manifesting and other practices like that. I could see that it worked. I was teaching clients. I was seeing it work for them. But this was like a whole other level, and I could not explain it with anything scientifically that I knew. So essentially where I landed is, if it works, it works. I'm not going to believe anything off of anyone else's pretend authority. And it's the very reason that we die and we don't know what happens afterwards that creates the meaning in life. If you don't know what happens and I don't know what happens, that means that all we have is here in this moment. And why not do as much good as we can in this world while we can? And so because the meaning comes from the fact that we will die, and my first tattoo was a huge design on my ribs that says in a dead language, Latin, memento mori, remember you will die. And I put it on my ribs because I am reclaiming my ribs from the Adam and Eve story.